Becca, you are muted. I don't know if you said anything.
Whenever you're ready.
Okay. All right. Good morning, everyone. And thank you for joining us for the fourth annual Delaware County Sustainability Conference hosted by the Delaware County Office of Sustainability. My name is Karen Millwall, and I am the director of the Delaware County Conservation District. I will be serving as the host for today's session. For some quick housekeeping items, this session will take place in a Zoom webinar format. This means that participants will be off camera throughout the duration of the presentation. Questions are encouraged and will be addressed following the presentation. To ask a question, you may either type it in the Q&A box found at the bottom of your screen or click on the raise a hand button if you would like to ask your question out loud. Questions will be answered in the order in which they are received, or if we are seeing multiple questions of a similar nature, we can bump those to the front. We will do our best to ensure that all questions have been answered. However, we will be ending the session at the top of the hour. To kick us off, we are thrilled to welcome our exclusive sponsor for today's session, Kelly Herring-Cole, Vice President of Communications and Engagement of Natural Lands. Kelly?
Thanks so much for having us. Natural Lands is thrilled to be a sponsor of this conference and of this session especially because our colleagues have been working on the project that you'll get to hear about today. Natural Lands is a nonprofit conservation organization. We're based in Delaware County in Media, but we work all across the eastern part of Pennsylvania and into southern New Jersey. And we like to think about our work in kind of three buckets. One is saving open space, caring for nature, and connecting people to the outdoors and each other. We do this through a bunch of different ways, some traditional conservation methods like owning nature preserves. We have 40 preserves across the region, totaling about 23,000 acres that are free and open to the public. We hope you come visit. We also work with private landowners to conserve their land with conservation easements. And then we also work with municipalities to help them achieve their open space goals, whether that is working with them on their parks and open space plans or stormwater management or the kind of project you are about to hear about today with managing a creek watershed across many, many municipalities. So we love what we get to do. We encourage you to come check us out at natlands.org to learn more. And I would like to take just a few minutes to introduce today's speakers. Kate Raman, my colleague, is Conservation Project Manager here at Natural Lands. She holds a master's degree in spatial analytics and has over 19 years of municipal planning and research experience. She joined Natural Lands in 2018 and supports a variety of projects for Natural Lands land protection and planning teams, including easement and fee acquisitions, mapping and GIS support, open space planning, and ordinance reviews. Her work has resulted in 1,475 protected acres with more than 8.3 million in grant funds awarded for land protection. Kate's previous work includes in the New Jersey Office of Smart Growth, where she worked with municipalities to update their master plans and zoning codes. Kate has her undergraduate degree in environmental policy from Rutgers University and her master's degree in spatial analysis from the University of Pennsylvania. Our second presenter is Mike Leventry. Mike has a geography and environmental planning degree from Bloomsburg University. He's been a planner for over 20 years, 10 years with Delaware County, and prior to that, he with the city of Wilmington, Delaware, and in Berks County. Mike currently serves as the environmental manager of the Delaware County Planning Department. And our third presenter is Stephen Schultz. He works as a specialist for the Delaware County Department of Emergency Services. He's worked in emergency services since 2008 and has been with the county for the past 2 years. Stephen has an associate's degree from Delaware County Community College in emergency management and planning, a bachelor's degree in emergency management and planning from Immaculata University, and is in the process of completing his master's degree in emergency and disaster management from Thomas Jefferson University. Clearly, Stephen is who you want when you need to talk about disaster management. Stephen has worked in fire, EMS, hazardous materials response, and environmental services through all stages of the emergency management process. Some incidents of note that Stephen was a part of are the papal visit during his time with the Red Cross, the straight line windstorm of 2015 as the emergency manager for Brookhaven Borough, and as logistics section chief under the USDA MDA in the decontamination branch during the 2021 avian flu outbreak. Currently, Stephen works on the Delaware County Hazard Mitigation Plan with Larry Bach and assists with the coordination of the 49 municipalities involved with the plan. He also works with surrounding counties and other stakeholders on these projects. So thank you all so much for being here and sharing about this really great and collaborative project, and I will turn it over to you all.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for the introduction, Kelly. So we talked a lot about natural lands and what we do here. I'm just going to skip over some of these slides. You might be wondering why a land trust is involved with municipal planning and working with municipal governments. We had leadership in our conservation department some time ago realize that we cannot protect all the open space we'd like to protect on our own. So we needed to work with municipal governments and other partners to do everything we can to have great open spaces and sustainable watersheds across the region. So as Kelly said, I'm Kate Raman, Conservation Project Manager. This project is the technically titled the Darby Creek Watershed Resilience Conservation and Management Plan. I'm going to refer to it as the watershed plan because we are planning at a watershed level. And these are some of our funders, including the Delco Green Space and Trails Project and DCVA, which is the Darby Creek Valley Association, DCNR, Foundation for Delaware County, and William Penn Foundation. I am part of the planning team here in the Conservation Department at Natural Lands, but there are 5 people total working on this project, including Rick Traley, Ann Hutchinson, myself, my colleagues, Nick and Juliana. We are also collaborating with folks from Delaware County. Rebecca Yurkovich from Delaware County Office of Sustainability and Mike, who is introduced, as well as Steve. I'm going to kick us off with an introduction to watershed planning. I'm sure many of you on the call are familiar with watershed planning if you're interested in attending this session. We do just want to make sure that everyone is on the same page before we get into our work on the project. So the primary audience for the watershed plan is municipal officials, but also property owners, business owners, and residents of the watershed. So what is a watershed? A watershed is the land area extending from the topographic high points where water collects, such as ridges, down to a low point where the area drains into a creek, a river, bay, ocean, or other water body. The Darby Creek watershed in our study area includes the Cobbs Creek as well. The Cobbs Creek is a major tributary to the Darby Creek. And this watershed encompasses 123 linear miles of streams. We're not just focused on the Darby and the Cobbs, we're focused on all those tributaries that contribute to the Darby and the Cobbs. This water falls on a 78 square mile area that makes its way through streams and creeks, and then through the John Hines National Wildlife Refuge and onto the Delaware River. About 500,000 people live in this watershed. The watershed is predominantly Delaware County, but it does span 4 counties and 31 municipalities. So there's a few Montgomery County municipalities, a few Chester County, and the city of Philadelphia as well. I have a video to explain the points I just went over, and I'm going to hope that it works. If someone could confirm, that'd be great. I'm going to hit play.
It's working.
We just don't have sound.
No sound. Yeah.
We're going to see if we can get sound for this video going.
I heard that there is no sound.
That's
That's
correct.
correct.
Oh, I'm sorry. Um, I'll just move ahead. The video was illustrating essentially the points that were that I was making earlier. I'm sorry we couldn't get the sound to work on that. Oops. So, what is a watershed plan and why do we need one? Since the 1980s, planners and agencies have been shifting towards watershed-wide management approaches. It's very difficult for one municipality to impact water quality or flooding or water supply issues by themselves. And so we really have to work together to implement this plan and make sure the strategies we're suggesting in the plan work. So we're involving as many stakeholders as possible. There was actually a public meeting Tuesday night and last night for the central and upper watersheds, respectively, to bring together partners and nonprofits working in the watershed and residents. So the watershed planning process has this framework of stakeholders working together to identify specific causes and sources of both water quality problems, flooding problems. And so we're working at this watershed level to make sure that our plan is implementable and realizable. We are working with a group of stakeholders. They have helped us to identify goals. So the planning process, we're at the stage now where we've evaluated existing conditions and identified and prioritized problems in the watershed. And we're developing strategies that align with the goals that the stakeholder committee has assigned to us, which are to establish a Darby Creek watershed greenway, to monitor stormwater plans, to identify parcels for conservation and restoration, to promote efforts to establish, improve, and enforce existing ordinances in municipalities, to promote equity and environmental justice across the watershed. And we're going to get into that a little bit more in a bit. There's a lot of varying conditions in terms of even municipal budgets across the watershed, and prepare for the increased effects of climate change with a focus on flooding. I'll note that the watershed plan isn't going to solve flooding. We're going to talk in a minute about impervious cover in an urban watershed, but we are trying to enhance infiltration. That is our goal here. We know that the amount of flooding we're seeing in the Darby Creek watershed is too much for a watershed plan to manage completely, but we are working together. So we're essentially, Mike, Steve, and I are working on a puzzle, but we're not all going to be sitting at the table at the same time. So the watershed plan is being completed this year in 2025. Mike Leventry's plan, the stormwater, the Act 167 plan, it has a 2026 timeframe. And then the hazard mitigation plan will, I believe, begin in 2027 to be adopted in 2028. However, there will be a lot of overlap in terms of the strategies we're suggesting here, and we want to make sure that we're making it easy for municipalities to comply with all three plans, which is why Steve and Mike and I are working so closely together now. The Darby Creek watershed is not alone. As I mentioned, the Cobbs Creek is also part of our study area. And then the Crum Creek Basin is to the west, the southwest. We've also been working with folks from the Crum Creek Basin who are nonprofits working there to enhance water quality across the watershed. So we're going to continue on with the basics. This is just a graphic of the floodplain. The hydrologic floodplain is where the water is actively flowing or could flow. And then as the area widens out, you have the topographic floodplain where water is draining from an area into the hydraulic floodplain. This is important just to make sure we're on the same page moving forward. At Natural Lands, we generally encourage what we call riparian areas. That is this forested area next to the stream. In rural areas that haven't been developed much already, we like to suggest a 300-foot buffer on either side from the center line of a stream. We are working in a very urban watershed, and that's not always possible. There's development sometimes in that, what we call riparian area. So next, we're going to get into some of the challenges of the urban watershed. So we're not dealing with the blank slate. We're dealing with a lot of existing development in the Darby Creek watershed and the Cobbs Creek watershed. And there's some special considerations here. So the watershed is, I would say, predominantly urban. The central and upper watershed are more suburban. And municipalities, especially in the lower watershed, do have considerable impervious cover already. In the next few slides, I'm going to show a map of that impervious cover and how it's changed over time. And there's very little open space left. A lot of the communities are built out, but there still are opportunities to enhance infiltration and the resilience of the watershed. But we do have to understand current conditions first. So this is the map of impervious cover. In the legend, you can see since 1985, everything that is gray on this map was already impervious cover. So we've been dealing with a considerable amount of impervious cover for quite some time. By 2001, the purple areas were added. You can see those kind of just extending out from some of the gray areas. And then by 2019, some of those orange areas you see are added. So we're not seeing a tremendous amount of expansion of impervious cover, but we are dealing with quite a footprint in terms of the impervious cover that's there. And this is important because the more impervious cover you have, the more runoff you have, the more stormwater runoff you have. So you can see here in bold at the bottom of these graphics, you have natural cover, which is resulting in 10% runoff. 10 to 20% impervious cover results in perhaps 20% runoff. When we're moving up to 35 to 50% impervious surface, the runoff is more about like 30%. And then in places like Center City, Philadelphia, we're looking at more like 55 to 61% runoff. So the next graphic is similar. We are seeing that at what they call full urbanization. 61% of rainwater runs off the land. Okay, I'm going to pass it over to Steve.
Thank you, Kate. So, kind of to build on what Kate said and kind of touch a little bit on what I do is like she said, it's all working on a puzzle. So, flooding is going to occur. If you look in this picture right here, this is in Darby Borough, right down by McDade and Springfield Road. And what part of our job is to identify these locations where flooding inundation, flooding impacts are more severe. And then come up with plans that we can include in the hazard mitigation plan for how we can lessen that impact. If you want to go to the next slide. So a lot of this planning and how everything goes together is really, and then Mike will talk a little bit about the stormwater management and where we can, there's certain times that we can regulate things. But to what Kate said, we're so built out in this area already that we get more into the concept of what can we do to lessen the impact. So a big thing with that is, can we elevate structures? Can we change or avoid channelization? So when we have floodwater that is going through areas that have been significantly impacted by urbanization, we end up with these runoff issues and greater impacts to the people that live in the area. So what we try and do is we try and come up with ideas for projects that can be completed for those residents in those areas to try and assist them at the time of flooding. You can go on to the next slide. Which leads us to this image here, which I really like. It's kind of the ice cube theory, and I think it really describes my portion of dealing with floodplains very, very well. If anybody's familiar with Floyd, Darby got very strongly impacted by that storm, and there's a really good kind of expression of how this whole ice cube process works. So the more houses we have that are in that flood inundation zone. So they're not elevated structures. They're right down there, increasing the water level when the water comes down. Because like we said, anywhere it rains, it's going to flood. And in this watershed, especially being right by the Delaware River, all the water is coming down into this area. So pretty much on the hazard mitigation side, we're trying to plan for the inevitable. We can't necessarily stop the flooding, but what we can do is lessen the impact different ways we do that are working with stakeholders, working with possible grant opportunities, working with each municipality to go through the whole planning process, do a risk assessment. What structures are in your floodplain? What structures are near your floodplain? What possible culverts might be too small, or a big one we had a conversation with in another municipality was storing like industrial facilities, different tree facilities, storing things too close to a floodplain. A big conversation that comes in, especially in Darby, is as things are coming down the creek, when you think about garbage or trees or debris or stuff like that, it can start damming up at the bridges. And then once we dam up at these bridges, the water comes and rises in other areas. So, as part of the mitigation process, we kind of try and identify where these trouble spots are and then what projects we can do to essentially, take some of these ice cubes out, giving more space for the water to go essentially, or to flow better, so we can try and get out of these flooding situations with as little impact as possible, as much as we can mitigate that risk. Next one. Here's a really good image here of channelization after flooding. And I'm sure anybody that's gone, fishing or anything along any of the creeks in Delaware County, like Kate said, this is just one watershed amongst many. But when that floodwater comes through, you can see how it cuts into that bank and really just does damage to the waterway and changes its natural flow, which is where projects like this and working with Kate's folks and Mike, we all kind of come together with ideas for how we can kind of try and bring stream back more to their natural state, which ultimately assists with everything as far as downstream flooding and damage to property goes and everything like that. Here's a really good image. This is when I was talking about those debris coming down the waterways. You wouldn't even think, but like this storage container here is a really good example. We've had large fuel tanks. The capability of water and the strength and the damage is almost, you're not almost even able to understand it until you really see it. I mean, if you're looking at that storage container, you're probably in excess of 80,000 pounds. The amount of damage and power that these waterways have when they're in flood state, it really is amazing. And a lot of it really comes down to a lot of prevention. When we talk mitigation, can be done ahead of time. So if you look at this picture right here with the backhoe where the gentlemen are trying to get that debris out of there, if you really take a look at that, a lot of that is garbage, branches, things that were in place along stream banks possibly, or in storm drains, or just normal debris that most people don't think about as being a big deal on a normal day. But when we have these stream cleanup projects and we have the watershed folks that are really going out and looking at doing this preventative maintenance, when we end up in a storm situation where all of this debris, and like Kate said, I mean, this is extending all the way up into Montgomery County, right? So think about if we're doing stream cleanups all along the entire length of the Darby Cobbs, all that trash during a storm, all that debris, it's going to find its way down to where it can't get past. So it's going to find those bridges. It's going to cause bigger issues. If you look at this row of homes on the opposite bank in the same picture with the backhoe, that's the back side of the first picture, that you saw the flooding that goes up onto McDade and up towards the Dunkin' Donuts. So little projects make a big impact, and looking at the watershed holistically really gives us an opportunity to lessen impacts to the folks that live in these areas that are gonna incur damage from flooding.
Thank you, Steve.
Thanks, Kate.
Take it away. Bye.
All right, so thanks, Steve and Kate. I'm going to talk a bit about a complementary effort and give it an overview of Act 167 stormwater management planning. It's one of the puzzle pieces that Kate mentioned earlier. Act 167 plan is dialed in and more focused on identifying and alleviating flooding and stormwater related water pollution through improve design and future within future development. The act was passed in 1978 and mandates counties to adopt stormwater plans with support and input from municipalities through what's called a WAPAC, a Watershed Plan Advisory Committee. Like I mentioned, the plan helps to specifically address stormwater solutions within a watershed. In our case, this plan is countywide. I'm just going to touch a bit on, but not all, the technical aspects of an Act 167 stormwater plan. The plan will include a survey study model of existing runoff characteristics for a range of storm sizes, and it considers factors such as slope, vegetation, soils, and development. The plan will survey existing significant obstructions and their flooding impacts. It'll assess projected alternative development patterns. It'll also conduct a survey of drainage problems and proposed solutions. It'll review existing proposed stormwater collection systems, assess alternative runoff control techniques and their efficiency within the watershed. It'll develop criteria for runoff control standards for new development, and will develop best management practices, or BMPs, priorities for stormwater planning implementation specific to and tailored to the plan's area. And finally, the plan will set out provisions for reviewing and revising the plan every 5 years. And this is a county-wide plan that we're starting right now. Could I go to the next slide, please? So this basin is an excellent example of what's a solution that was presented in prior plans that's been found to be largely ineffective. It's a great example of the reasons why we do updates, why we have to readdress our plan and look at what's worked and what hasn't worked. It keeps ordinances and related BMPs as current and as effective as possible. I should note that there are options for retrofitting basins like this, and essentially it's naturalizing them to better infiltrate and filter pollutants from the water. But back to our plan. Our plan is going to include those previously mentioned technical elements, but it's going to be a little unique in two different ways. We're also going to collect MS4 and PennDOT stormwater system data. It's basically all the gray stormwater system data throughout the county, all the municipal systems, as well as, like I mentioned, the state roadway systems. We're going to create a GIS layer for those, and that'll help us better understand how water flows through municipalities and will help us in modeling efforts in the future. And the second kind of unique effort for this particular plan is we're going to develop a system of flood gauges throughout the county. We're going to deploy, we plan to deploy 70 gauges countywide, and the gauges will correlate with the modeling efforts. So we'll be able to monitor real time what's been modeled, see what's working, see, and compare different storm events real time to see, just to have that constant feedback. It'll also help us better understand the county and all the watersheds during our update processes. Finally, in addition to those two elements, this countywide plan will yield a new model ordinance. It'll be an updated version of what we presented in 2022. We'll be working with PADEP to address that 2022 ordinance to see what needs to be updated or revised. Looking forward to working with all municipalities through the WAPACs, engaging the public, and citizen really working with Steve and Kate as well, to make sure all of our efforts, jive and are complementary. That's it for me, I believe.
Thanks, Mike.
Yep.
So, as planners, we have been working on writing codes and development for a long time. But some of the development that we had that was built in the watershed in the 80s and 90s specifically has some issues. So you can see in this in this photo here, there's a very wide street, and there's not necessarily parking on the street. There's driveways, which are more impervious cover. There are curbs, there are leaves kind of covering some of the grates on either side, and there's quite a bit of rooftop space and lawns as well. This is all a considerable amount of impervious cover. And now that we know better, we try to do better. But there is, in addition to the impervious cover in terms of pavement, quite a lot of lawn in the watershed. So lawn basically acts as pavement. And you can see an example of that here. Water is running across the grass at such a rate that it actually has cut this channel into the lawn space. So we're not seeing that grassy areas absorb stormwater the way we thought they might have, 20 years ago. So we do need to, we do have an opportunity here in terms of renaturalizing the landscape in some areas to enhance infiltration. And this is the end of the sort of downer portion of the presentation. We've presented a lot of information about the baseline in the watershed and the problems that the watershed has right now, but there are solutions out there. So I'm going to be talking next about some of the potential strategies we're working to develop. I will mention that the plan is still being drafted. We're at the point now where we're running some of our suggested strategies by members of the public and by stakeholders. We hope to have a draft of the plan in the fall so the public can comment on the draft. But any comments that come up now would be great because we are still in the process of pulling the plan together. And there's been some great ideas we've heard in our public meetings. So in terms of enhancing resilience, what we're hearing from folks is that some people are very interested in reducing their lawn, but they don't necessarily know how to do it. It's a kind of an overwhelming thing for a lot of people to take on, even if they have a small yard. And there seems to be an impression that you have to get rid of your entire lawn. At Natural Lands, we're thinking about ways to focus on where stormwater drains. So right here, you can see two of the garden areas are closer to the sidewalk to capture stormwater on its way, draining down towards the roadways. And also considering a template. If you have a sunny yard, these species would work well. If you have a shady yard, these native species would work well. And making it easier for folks who have busy lives and have, perhaps they don't work in the landscape architecture or planning field. They just want to get their rain garden in and reduce their lawn in a straightforward manner. So we're considering that because it does seem like folks are very interested in this, but it is very overwhelming. The next thing we saw were a lot of redevelopment going on. There's a lot of redevelopment going on in the commercial corridors, especially in the lower watershed. Now, commercial properties generally flip or are redeveloped faster than residential properties. And if you just drive around in the lower watershed, you can see evidence of this. There are quite a few commercial areas being redeveloped. However, these areas were perhaps entirely paved because they were built in the 70s and 80s. And when they're being redeveloped, they're not necessarily putting in any landscaping. They're not considering the shade. They're not considering stormwater runoff. They're also not very attractive places to shop or walk to. So this is just an example we saw in the watershed. There's quite a few stores that are maybe open, but have a large sort of sea of parking lot with very few cars in it. There's also a lot of vacant and abandoned commercial areas in the watershed. So if we can work with business owners and municipalities to update codes and encourage folks to have more attractive parking lot landscaping, we could really have cumulatively a large footprint to work with. The picture you're seeing on the right here is our Stoneleigh parking lot. This is one of my favorite parking lots. You'll notice there are no curbs there and quite a bit of native landscaping to soak up the stormwater that runs off that parking lot. This next slide, I didn't mean it for it to look like this, but it's almost one of those "Are you a robot?" slides. You'll see that in all the photos but one, there are pedestrians. And this is another issue with the commercial areas in the watershed. There are a lot of people walking to these commercial areas. However, the pedestrian infrastructure, and which is related, by the way, to the stormwater, the green stormwater infrastructure we would call features, are not really working for the pedestrians or for vegetation. You can see some very high curbs here. There was someone in the center, top center there with a walker, and then someone else was pushing a cart. But you'll see that curb that they're next to is very high to cross over. There is some grading on the other side, but there's some real obstacles in the way of pedestrians who are trying to get to these commercial areas in the lower watershed. Some of them also have public transportation infrastructure, bus stops and things like that. But then once you get there, it's still a long walk past some really wide streets and very few trees and very little vegetation there. There's also some non-traditional restoration and conservation opportunities. At Natural Lands, we look at aerial photography a lot. I can tell you on the left side here, these are all cemeteries. When we looked at cemeteries and golf courses, which you see on the right image, they only make up 3% of the total land of the watershed. However, municipality by municipality, they become sort of the last remaining open space that's available. So for instance, what you're seeing on the left is Yaden and a portion of Philadelphia there as well. Their cemeteries is really important for them. I mean, it's the last open space they have there, and if those could just be managed in a way to enhance resilience, it's even adding some trees along the entranceways, or if there's a stream there, a riparian buffer, that could really help enhance infiltration. Same with the golf courses. There's quite a few golf courses in the watershed. At Natural Lands, we have been successful flipping a golf course to a public park. However, most of the golf courses in the watershed are doing very well. We're not necessarily seeing golf courses going out of business in this area, but are there opportunities for golf courses to enhance their practices and consider doing some restoration on their properties to absorb stormwater or just enhance the look of the land? So these are some of the strategies we've been considering. And we are working to have a highly implementable plan. We want this plan to be opened by folks at the watershed level, at the municipal level, at the resident level, and know what portion of it is for you and to have some applicable actions. So at the watershed level, we're considering a watershed-wide environmental advisory group. EACs normally operate at the municipal level, and there are certain rules and regulations associated with them and what they have the power to do. We would like to bring those folks together where they exist. We also want to encourage more EACs across the watershed. We'd like to have a biannual meeting of nonprofits working in the watershed. As part of our public meetings, we're evaluating where nonprofits are working and where the gaps are. The nonprofits also vary in their missions. Some are very water quality based, and some are picking up litter, things like that. So we want to see if we could work together more and take a look at capacity, because a lot of them work with volunteers, but they don't have an infinite amount of capacity to work with volunteers. Something that's come up quite a bit from Delaware County is there could be a more cohesive brand and signage for the Darby Creek watershed, similar to the Brandywine. There's quite a bit of signage when you enter the Brandywine Valley and a similar look to a lot of the signs associated with the creek. So if something like that could be done for Darby Creek, it would be helpful, especially because downstream of Radnor, a lot of the Darby Creek is underground. It's essentially not what we call daylit. So you might not know that you're in the watershed, and you might not know you're crossing the creek at certain points. These kind of signage would also be helpful for flooding and to let people know where areas flood and where historic highs of floods were. At the municipal level, we're looking at ordinance updates. We have at Natural Lands evaluated all 31 municipal ordinances. We're looking for certain criteria in those ordinances. We are working to distill those reviews down from something like a score of 1 to 5. We're still working on that to determine how badly an ordinance needs updating. We're also considering what we're calling a capital improvement resiliency checklist. So most municipal budgets include a capital improvement plan, and they may or may not be doing things to harm or enhance resilience. And even simple changes like perhaps buying a salt alternative for your road salt could help the watershed quite a bit. So that's something we're considering. And because that capital improvement plan has to be done by every municipality, that's a good time to sort of check in. The commercial corridor revitalization we talked about. There is a program called the FEMA Community Rating System that enables municipalities to comply sort of above and beyond what they would normally have to do to get a discount on resident flood insurance from FEMA. So by reducing their risk, they're reducing the rates, the insurance rates for those that need flood insurance. So that's something we're thinking about. A lot of those recommendations for the community rating system, the suggested actions are things we would suggest anyway. So we think that that might help quite a few municipalities. We are working to enhance infiltration in multiple ways and looking at the enforcement of ordinances. So not just is the ordinance content appropriate, but is the municipality granting variances to their rules too often? Are they not enforcing their own ordinance to their detriment of their residents and the land itself? We are working as well to protect and connect protected lands along the Darby Creek. That's something that's very important to our stakeholder committee. And then establish more EACs, especially in the lower watershed. In the upper and central, there's quite a few environmental advisory groups, but in the lower watershed, there aren't as many. At the resident level, we'd like to connect residents to the nonprofits in the watershed. And in here, we do feel there really is something for everyone. Even if you're a renter and you're not in the floodplain, but you're concerned about the watershed, there's groups out there you could work with. We also do want to work on lawn reduction and helping people address that, making it a little less intimidating and making that work for folks who want to undertake that. And then additional resident home resilience programs. For instance, if your basement is experiencing flooding, is there a program out there for you that can help with that? Preparedness before storms, making sure that perhaps the street lights have some way of coming on if the power goes out for a number of days, etc. And the rest of my slides are geared towards our public meetings where we've been asking folks to comment. So there is a public meeting coming up on the 24th of June at the Cobbs Creek Environmental Center. If anyone's interested, I can send the information on that. But at our public meetings, we are bringing out large maps and asking folks to comment, to put stickers on the maps. We're recording all of the public comment. And yeah, that's it. It's just my contact information and the thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you all so much for this important presentation. I just wanted to point out something that Steve said, and that is that little project make a big impact. I really want to drive that home and just point out that everyone can do something to make a difference in their watershed, reduce stormwater volume, and ultimately help contribute to the reduction of flooding in these developed watersheds. So thank you all so much for your presentations. We will now open up the floor for questions. I do not see any questions in our Q&A. I'll give folks another minute to type anything in or to raise your hand if you would like to speak up over Zoom. But y'all did such a fantastic job of covering everything in such great detail. I'd like to put the Conservation District works very closely with our planning department on these stormwater plans. And we also administer the county's MS4 permit, which is the municipal separate storm sewer system permit that is administered by DEP. So we work closely with planning and our other county departments on that permit to help reduce non-point source pollution and reduce stormwater volumes. I still do not see, I do see a question from Josh Mintzer. Are there funding sources to help implement flood mitigation projects?
I can kind of speak to that one a little bit. There are. It depends on the project. It also depends on what's going on in the general area. Has there been a recent disaster? Is it a project associated with disaster damage, or is it a project just associated with trying to lessen an impact? The biggest thing to consider when you're thinking about funding is, especially with current changes, we're working closely with PEMA to navigate all of that. But now is a very good time to look into things you haven't thought of before. So different organizations, different foundations, locally available options. But there's definitely funds out there, but you got to be creative and you have to participate if you're a municipality in the hazard mitigation plan. That is the key to a lot of different funding, is making sure that you've been a part of that process.
And I'll just follow up, and it depends on the project, what you have in mind. But for municipalities, the William Penn Foundation here in our region has been very supportive. So I would check out their funding opportunities. They're very active and supportive in municipal efforts.
Great, thank you. And then Josh has a follow-up question. He was also wondering what the anticipated timelines are for each of the projects that you discussed.
Well, I can start. We hope to have our plan wrapped up by August, the end of August 2026, and we'll start engaging after that with the model ordinance. But so roughly next summer for us.
And for the watershed plan, we're hoping to be done by this year. There will be a draft in the fall and another large public meeting, a watershed-wide public meeting for comment on the draft.
For hazard mitigation, we're on a 5-year cycle for renewal. So right now we're in the maintenance and update portion of the current plan. So every March we have an update meeting just to kind of go over municipal projects, stakeholder projects. So anybody that wants to go to that is always welcome. And then our next incarnation of the newly adopted plan will be in 2028.
And I'd like to mention that over the next year, we'll have a series of 6 WAPAC or Watershed Plan Advisory Committee meetings. So throughout the process of our plan, we'll be reaching out to municipalities. And then something Steve and I have discussed in the past is hopefully pairing up updates for our respective plans together, so that because they're so interrelated, so we can reach out to our municipalities in a collaborative way, so that we can update together and make it all make sense.
Awesome, thank you all. I actually have a question for all of you. What does public participation look like for developing these plans? How well attended are public meetings to garner feedback?
I can start since we're doing our public outreach right now. So I think, the audience for our plans is slightly different. We definitely want more resident input in the watershed plan, more nonprofit input, and input from municipalities. Our outreach process is considerable, but we don't, we'd always like more people to attend. Our average participation across the nation at public meetings is 7 people. So at the last 2 nights, we've had about 20 people attend our public meetings, but we would really like to fill a room, especially for the last meeting. We've been breaking up the geographic area into upper, central, and lower watershed because we don't want folks to have to drive too far to get to the meeting. But yeah, public input is very important to us. We've been hearing really great ideas from the public, and we would encourage anyone watching today to attend one of our meetings. The meeting coming up for this plan is on June 24th.
If I could kind of jump on what Kate said as well, just as from the hazard mitigation side, ours is really interesting. It's kind of multiple levels, and to what Mike said, we're talking to a lot of the same people. A lot of what I do is encourage the local municipal leaders to bring this back to their municipalities and then have their residents express it municipal meetings so they can express us at the county level. But we're really trying to get everyone's thoughts, everyone's knowledge included in this plan so we can have the greatest impact.
And then I'll just follow up. Our WAPAC committees are generally made up of, they're more technical and made up with floodplain managers or municipal engineers. However, this planning effort will also reach out through social media. We'll have public surveys, And then we really hope to get out to like public events and even some community festivals to, just be kind of more visible and aware, so people are aware of our effort and can learn more about stormwater planning.
Great, thank you all. I don't see any more questions in the chat, and I don't see anyone's hands raised, so we will wrap up. So thank you again, Steve, Mike, and Kate, for your fantastic presentations. And thank you to all who have watched and participated in today's session. Following the close of the session on Zoom, you will be added your feedback to our speakers in a brief survey. We appreciate your time in completing this form and help us develop presentations for next year's conference. The next session in the conference is actually a perfect follow-up to this presentation. It is titled Become Watershed Friendly from Home. It will be held this afternoon at 12 p.m. And presented by Megan Hopkins-Dorr, who is the Penn State Extension Master Watershed Steward Coordinator for both Chester and Delaware counties. If you did not sign up prior for this session and you're interested in tuning in, please visit delcopa.gov/sustainability/conference to sign up. And finally, we would like to invite you all to attend our closing keynote celebration this Saturday, June 14th at the Lazaretto in Tinicum Township. The event will include a breakfast and a keynote presentation from Glenn Hurricane Schultz, local celebrity and meteorologist, and will be followed by an EV Expo networking with more than 30 local organizations and museum tours in the historic Lazaretto Quarantine Station. Walk-ins are welcome. So thank you again for your participation in the 4th Annual Delaware County Sustainability Conference.